Hello everyone, today we're having a look at Rauha. I'm gonna pronounce it like that, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's full of divine entities, biomes, and triggering lots of different columns or rows, scoring along the way, and hopefully taking some tiles off your opponents. This was provided to me for the review and plays with 2 to 5 players in around 45 minutes, and it's fairly consistent because a lot of the game, or at least some of the game, is done simultaneously. Let's touch roughly on how the game plays and then I'll give you my thoughts. So the game is going to be played out over 12 rounds, and then every 3 rounds there's going to be scoring. Scoring is going to be based on what you can trigger from your board, as well as some of the divine entities, basically the tiles, these like godlike abilities almost, that you can hopefully hold onto for those scoring phases. The game is going to be somewhat drafting. It's not passing around the table, but on a round, everyone is going to take the pile from their left or their right, dictated by the round. Basically, the round, you have a little marker that moves around your board to indicate what the round is. It will be the sun, so you'll be taking from your left, or the moon, and you'll take from your right. Say it's the moon, you take all the cards from that pile, you're going to pick one of those cards to add to your board. Then you put the rest down, and the next round, that person is going to be choosing from that pile, and you'll be choosing from the other. So you're kind of only, for that part of the game, interacting with your neighbours, but there is sort of interaction across the table, and we'll come on to that later on. So once you've chosen your new biome that you're going to be putting down, it's going to have a type of terrain, it's going to sometimes have a cost or maybe a placement requirement. So maybe this costs you 2 gems to place. Instead of having a cost, it might have a placement requirement. It could even be free though. But a placement one basically means it's going to show you where on your 3x3 grid you can place it and you can't place it anywhere else. So for example, you can only put it on, say, the top row. That would be a placement requirement, and you could choose which of the 3 you want to cover up, including a biome you'd previously placed down. Now, why are you doing this? As you're playing the game, each of the rounds you're moving this marker around the board. Wherever it is, you're either going to trigger that row or column. So if it's at the top of your board, you're going to trigger the column that it's in once you've placed that down, and hopefully those tiles are going to generate you the gems which you're going to be spending, or points or spores. We'll come on to spores, but normally it's gems or points. Gems are going to allow you to activate things or buy the tiles, and points, well, that's going to win you the game hopefully. Sometimes it can be a trade, so it might be spend some resources, some of those gems for points, or it might just be have some points. So that's how that sort of works once you've done that. Now here's the sort of extra bit. If you manage to make a row or column, basically a 3 in a row that's not diagonal, have the same symbol, so maybe they all have the mountain biome symbol, or maybe they all have the feathers symbol, well, you're going to take the divine entity tile, and that's going to activate straight away. You're going to take it from the middle or from an opponent, which is where it becomes interactive with everyone, because, oh, that person across the table who I don't normally look at the cards with, oh, you've got that, but I've got that now. And that can be taken back off you. But when you take it, you're also going to get its thing. Normally that's some resources, some of those gems, or some points, or something along those lines. Sometimes though, it's maybe water symbols that you're not going to do much with now, but when it comes to scoring, well, maybe they're going to be useful. So you do 3 rounds of that, and each round you're moving on, taking from your left pile or your right pile. And I should say you can always choose to discard a card rather than take it, and that's going to get you 4 gems or a spore. Again, we'll come back to the spores in a second because they're really good for scoring. So once you've done your 3 rounds, you'll have activated the 3 columns at the start of the game. Then you go to the corner of the board, that's the scoring. You can then score those divine entity tiles that you've still got. You'll also score anything that you've put a spore on. So each of the 9 biomes has a little space for a spore. If you've put a spore down, you can activate that. Now, that doesn't just mean you can gain points from it, but you can re-earn some gems. Super helpful early on if you could generate extra gems during that scoring phase, but by the end, they're worthless. Well, they're buying you tiles, or they're cards, but they're not worth points. So at some point you need to switch your sort of engine from gems to getting some points at least. So that's what the spores are useful for. There's also a final thing, which are water drops. Now, certain tiles and that you're going to be putting down onto your 3x3 grid, as well as one of those entity tiles that only one person can have from getting that 3 in a row, they're going to have water symbols on them. Whoever's got the least gets nothing. Anyone that's got 1 more than them gets like 1 point. Anyone that's got 2 more than them gets 3 points, and so on up to a maximum of 15 points. Now, 15 points can easily be the difference between winning or losing. It's also not game winning, definitely, because you can score a lot of points in this game. There's a reason there's a tile included that's like plus 100, plus 200. You can see after a couple of games how people could do that. I've not managed it though. But yes, so you play 3 rounds, you score, then it goes round to the side and you're activating the rows, another 3 rounds, score, 3 rounds, score, 3 rounds, and final scoring. You're always going to be holding on to those divine entities unless someone else does match a row or column of that symbol and takes it off you. So if you're lucky and you can get it early on and hold on to it, maybe each time you are scoring, that's getting you something. But if someone takes it off you, maybe you could place a tile and take it back. And it's whenever you gain it or in scoring that they trigger. So they're quite cool. And that's kind of it. It sounds from the rulebook more complicated than that, I think, but it's not. That is sort of it. You're playing on this 3x3 grid, activating the row or column depending on the round, scoring 4 times throughout the game, as well as potentially a little bits on each turn. And yeah, that is how you play. So let's start off by touching a little bit on something I alluded to a little bit then, the rulebook. The rulebook, I found, it was one of those rulebooks that once you've played the game, the rules make so much sense. When you've not played the game, and especially I normally sit there and will read through a rulebook. I don't normally set the game up in front of me and then read through it, but this is the sort of game that I think when you're learning the game, if it's set up in front of you before you teach it to others, if it's set up in front of you, that really helps. Because it just, for me, I found it just like twigs a little bit differently. And like I say, the rulebook, now I've played, yeah, that rulebook is absolutely fine. But I just struggled a little bit reading through, just working out quite how everything actually worked until we were actually in the situation when things were happening. For example, one thing were the spores. I wasn't entirely sure, they trigger. And it's like they're triggering what they're on, and you're flipping that spore over. That's a really cool little production thing, that they're sort of coloured differently on each side. So you can turn it over and be like, I've activated that. They're going to stay there though. And that's something I hadn't realised from reading the rules. They stay there, but you're turning them all over so they're all on like the purple side. Right, I've activated them all, we're good, we can carry on. And then in the next scoring phase, you flip them back all over to the white side and you're activating them. And it's little things like that they've done really good things, like that dual colouring on the spore tiles and stuff like that make the rules actually make sense and easy to remember when you're playing. But it just took me that slight second with the actual rule book to get there. Across the course of the game, you are going to be adding up to 12 tiles. And I say that because at times you aren't going to maybe be able to afford all of the tiles in your hand. You're looking at them and you're like, that's slightly annoying because that's 7. I've only got 4 gems at the moment, so I can't actually afford that, but it would be really good if I could have. I'm going to actually, though, discard it and gain stuff for it. And because I think it's a good tile, so that person might take it in a second. Or maybe you leave it in there, discarding another one, and hope it comes back to you in a minute on another turn away. You look from that pile, then you're back at this pile, and you're like, oh, they took it. Or you're like, no, they didn't, and I can now afford it. That's some really cool choices. Even though it's like 12 things you're taking and you're adding them to your 9 area, so you're definitely overbuilding at some point. It's some really nice choices of, right, I want to go for these tile tokens from the middle, those divine entities, because that's going to work with how I'm scoring. I'm going to try and go for all of the water and just get loads of points from that. I'm going to try and go for ones that give me spores, because then I can be activating more stuff in the scoring rounds and maybe be getting a lot of stuff from that way. And that's some really nice choices. But there are some choices which will flat out win you the game if people don't stop you. I've touched on one of them, and that's water, and the other one are certain spore tiles. So I don't know if I would say this is a flaw with the game, but it is a flaw for first-time players. And that is very reminiscent. If you've played Seven Wonders, you'll know if you take enough of those green science cards, and no one stops you, you will score so many points it doesn't matter what anyone else has done. In this, if people don't stop you when it comes to water, if you've got so much more water than anyone else, you're going to be getting so much more points in that scoring that it's hard work. And again, there's some cards in here. You score points depending on how many spores you've got down. If you can get many of those cards down, you can absolutely reap in the rewards and just get so many points. Again, you just need to watch out for it. It needs to be, and it was my fault in the first game we played of this. I could have taken the card. Even though it wasn't great for me, I should have noticed, oh, you've already got some cards scoring you for spores. If I let you have this as well, you're just going to get so many each round. So there is an element of the hate drafting-y side of drafting, where you do need to look at what your opponents are doing, and all the way around the table for those waters, and just make sure that they're not going to get one of those, like the Seven Wonders Science, one of those opportunities to just run away with points. In your first game, if you don't know about those, you might really lose. I certainly did. I was behind by probably about 100 points. Because I thought I was doing alright, and then all of a sudden we got to one of those scorings, and it was like, wow, you've scored almost as many points as I've already got in just this scoring phase, let alone what you've done up to it. And you're going to get that again and again because there's 2 scoring phases left. When it comes to the production, there are a couple of things that I'd have liked to see done a little bit differently. While I think the cards could have been tiles, they shuffle so much easier as cards, so that makes sense. But I do wish they were a bit more colourful, because the beigeness of the box here is a little reminiscent of how beige the cards are as well. They've got some lovely little details on them, and the colourful bits do, sort of the bursts of colour have little details, and they're nice little scenes on them, these biomes. I just wish the hold card was colourful, and there seems to be no reason why they didn't go down that route and just beiged it up. I feel like a bit more vibrancy, a bit more colour could have just made these biomes in this map you've sort of built in front of you just pop off the table that little bit more. Also, the central board being a circle, the score tracker for that I just personally found it was a little hard to follow moving round when you're reaching across the table. Others didn't have that problem. I did. Maybe that's me, but I still got to mention it. In terms of player interaction, it's not the most from a drafting game, but that part is all simultaneous in terms of when you're picking a card. Then it goes round the table in order as you're putting the stuff down. And this is where player order is actually really quite important, because if you're first, you can try and claim one of those divine entity tiles from the middle and be like, yes, I've put 3 mountains in a row. Boom! I've got that tile. There's scoring in a second because it's the 3rd round, so scoring is next. In a 4-player game, that tile can be taken by every player round the table, and it's whoever is then fought in last place on the turn order is going to get it. And that turn order is defined by whoever is in the lead is the first player, and then it goes from then. And that is, I mean, at times you don't want to be first. In fact, for the majority of the game, you almost want to be just hugging in second, because that could mean you are 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th in the turn order. Being first, certainly in the 3rd round each time, when it's just before scoring, you know, the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th and the 12th round, you don't want to be first because you're almost certain to see those tiles moving a lot, and you get one, it's almost certainly not safe. It's going to get taken off you. And there's a lot of interaction from that. It just feels like sometimes, well, you're in the lead. You shouldn't have almost tried to score as many points. You shouldn't have done as well as you could. You should have hung back, not had that target on your back, and maybe you could have scored huge in this scoring phase. So there's some choices there. Sometimes you're not wanting to score, which is counterintuitive, but an interesting lot of choices for this. When it comes to player count, it's 2 to 5 on the box. Now, I've not gone all the way to 5, but I have gone up to 4 players. Now, because of the simultaneousness of the drafting, that's quite quick. We did, that was teaching with that game, so that took about an hour. 45 minutes on the box, it's probably about right. It was probably about a 10-ish minute teach and then a 45-minute game with 4 people. First time, you'll speed up a little bit in some aspects, slow down as you're trying to make some of those choices though. So yeah, 45 minutes for that player count. I think you can though, you can definitely make this quicker at 2. There's some choices there, but I think at 2 it's going to be some people are going to love this because it's going to be cutthroat and quick at 2. Really quick, because within 2 turns you're going to see all the cards. Then you're like, right, they might take this, and yeah, it works. The drafting works at 2, and I think, yeah, the speed of it, some people are really going to like. And I think I'm going to so I prefer it at the lower player count. I don't want to really play it at 5. I think there's too much movement of those tiles around the game for me. I'd say 2 and 3 for me is where it shines, and I think some people will just love this as a 2-player game. But anyway, that is Rauha. Hopefully this has given you a little bit of an understanding about how the game works, if it's for you. Touching on a few of the points, personally I think it's better at lower player counts, but it works, and there is plenty of player interaction even at higher player counts. It's still relatively quick because the drafting part at least is simultaneous, even though the tile placement part and triggering stuff is then in turn order. I do wish it was a bit more colourful. Some of the artwork, the colour bit is cool, and I just wish that had dragged out to the sides of the box and the tiles, really. Because I just think the vibrancy would have captured people's eye, and it would just make the whole game that bit more fun to look at. I do like the way you're choosing where to put the tiles, because I'm triggering this column. Right, if I put a tile here, it's going to trigger 4 times in this game. But if I put it over here, I might be able to get a line of 3, lots of trees or whatever, to get that token from the middle. And that's going to get me something if it's not taken off me. Yeah, You're going to enjoy this if you like some interaction, you like some drafting. Like I say, I just wish it was a tad more colourful. But that is still a solid game. I think some people are going to definitely enjoy this one. Please check out other stuff on the channel, news, reviews and all that sort of jazz. And until next time, have a great day gaming.